This video is going to look at Act 2, Scene 2 of Macbeth in detail. This is obviously one of the key scenes of the play. We don't get to see the murder of Duncan, but what we do get to see is the immediate impact on Macbeth and Lady Macbeth and the contrast between the two of them and their behaviour. It begins with Lady Macbeth on her own. An interesting echo of the structure of Act 3, Scene 2, when we see Lady Macbeth on her own, and then Macbeth comes in and we see her attempt to kind of control him a little bit, or at least control his reaction. But at the beginning here, when she's waiting for Macbeth to return from killing Duncan, what we get is we get an insight that at this point she seems to feel incredibly excited about it. Yes, nervous, but more of a nervous excitement than any kind of worry or regret like Macbeth had as he was on his way. He comes back in an agitated state, covered in blood, holding the bloody daggers. She doesn't see the bloody daggers at this point, apparently. He then voices his concerns. He can't say the word amen when he wanted to, and that he heard a voice saying Macbeth shall sleep no more. Lady Macbeth seemed unconcerned by this and certainly practical in her response. And of course, we're going to have to deal with the idea of whether these are things that actually happen to Macbeth or whether this is just an externalisation of his inner guilt at this point. Lady Macbeth then sees the daggers. When he refuses to take them back, she does, to frame the guards. When she returns, she washes them both up, takes Macbeth back to bed. And he wishes Duncan was alive again. In other words, basically, without Lady Macbeth, it appears Macbeth would have been caught, because he is so overtaken by the enormity of what he's done that in the end he really is ready to stand there holding bloody daggers, staring at the blood on himself, rather than actually do something practical about it. So her role, very, very important. But I think what we'll notice, as much as anything else, looking through it, is the difference in their attitudes. Okay, so if we take the big issues that we've always identified, the two characters, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and their relationship, and then we take the supernatural, the ambition and loyalty, kind of dichotomy, gender and kingdom. In this scene, we're probably focusing most on the top four. Obviously, there's elements of ambition and loyalty in here, and yeah, the way that they interact has elements of, I see, masculinity. But I think their two characters, their relationship, and what impact the supernatural has got to be the centre of this. So if we start with a key moment that takes in the beginning of Macbeth's first entrance, the bit where Lady Macbeth is waiting for him, then hears his voice and is unsure who he is outside. Now, this is obviously very focused on her. What we're really searching for is to see what this tells us about her without Macbeth there. The last time we heard her without Macbeth was in her soliloquies when we first met her. So how is she feeling at this point? We've had a lot about Macbeth's issues. Okay, well, first of all, she refers to the alcohol she has plied them with. Obviously, hers wasn't drugged. But creates this comparison between them being drunk and them being quenched, them being defeated by it. But she's been made bold, she's been given fire. So the very first thing that Shakespeare wants us to get at the beginning of this scene is how excited she is, how the influence that the alcohol's had on her, it's given her a sense of, as she says, it's given her fire underneath her. This puts her on edge. When we move into the bit where the owl, she hears shrieks, and of course the owl, which comes up several times in the play, is a bird I've referred to, I think, elsewhere as a bird of ill omen, and that's what it is. It's a bird that represents death and, you know, danger and evil to people around it. That suggests she's on edge, but it also possibly could well suggest, as she calls it, the fatal bellman here, the owl, could possibly be a suggestion of supernatural interference. It will be at this point that Macbeth would have come back and would have killed the two of them, or killed the king, and gone past the two people outside that they're going to frame. It will be at that point that the supernatural therefore has achieved what it wants to achieve. Is that a celebratory owl shrieking, or is it just there for the reaction she'll have to it? Well, if we look, once Macbeth says who's there, what ho, off stage, which is what within means, and she's unsure what it means, we get a kind of indication of what maybe that does suggest to us. First of all, the "I'm afraid they've awaked and it's not done" shows the kind of panic. And actually, the bit I haven't highlighted underneath, the attempt to "not the deed confounds us," might actually be just as interesting. That she seems much more bothered by the idea, not that they're going to be caught being a problem, but the fact that they're going to be caught trying and not succeeding, which I think tells us quite a lot. And it's not a lot of evidence for it, but at times I've often wondered if we're meant to see something between Lady Macbeth and Duncan personally. I mean, why does she want to achieve the murder if they're going to be caught? That seems to be the suggestion. But also at the same time, it's a lot of just concern over whether they failed, and again, potentially her lack of trust in Macbeth. She says, "I laid their daggers ready, he couldn't miss them." Kind of suggests that she's kind of thinking, "Oh God, has he messed up again?" And then that leads us to that final line, which, like the first, is probably the key line from this passage for you to consider. "Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it." It's one of those lines, like her bit about the baby elsewhere, that comes kind of out of nowhere, is never repeated again. So what's the indication here? Are we meant to take on board the idea that she had a close relationship with her father, which is why she couldn't do it? Is it meant to show us a different side to her? Is it meant to be another, like in the use of the words tender and love when they're talking about the baby? Is it meant to reflect on the idea that maybe in the past Lady Macbeth was somebody quite different? Is it meant to show us that her femininity hasn't completely gone? Or is it meant to bring in the idea, is the important bit, not my father, but the "I had done it"? The idea that despite her gender, the restrictions, all the things that she's worked at, that she was given so much fire by the situation that she was quite ready to go in and kill them herself. Well, I think the thing we've got to worry about then, or consider here, is, first of all, why give her a soliloquy at this point? And why give her a soliloquy, not just not Macbeth? Why allow us inside her feelings at this point? And then once we've got into the idea of why that's been done, then we look at the detail of it and think, what's it telling us as feeling about the murder? And then we've got to think about that impact of the line about the father. Possibly less of a moment than maybe this one, if it came up. This one certainly, even if it didn't come up, is full of things that could easily be used in terms of particularly their relationship, but also Lady Macbeth's character. We've got Macbeth's idea. He's had the thing about Amen before. How he heard what appears to be Malcolm and Donalbain wake up, say prayers, go back to sleep, and he wanted to say Amen when they finished, and he couldn't. And now he moves on to this idea of murdering sleep, the idea that he's murdered sleep, and particularly the fact he heard a voice cry. Now, at the heart of this is a central question to the play, which is, did a voice cry, "Sleep no more, Macbeth does murder sleep"? Right? Or is this externalising his guilt? It's the same question as the dagger. Was there a dagger there? Or was it an externalisation of his guilt and fear? Was Banquo's ghost there? Or was it an externalisation of his guilt? If you believe they were really there and take it on board, then what we're considering is interference from the supernatural. And at this point, particularly, if the dagger then led him to do it, is the sense that at the moment that he killed Duncan, they've now got very little more use for him. And so rather than allow an established order to come back in, because, supernatural forces want chaos, are they then continuing the chaos by haunting Macbeth and taunting him with this inability to say amen, with this voice crying, "Sleep no more, Macbeth, murder sleep"? Certainly in the highlighted example here, Glamis hath murdered sleep, therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more, Macbeth shall sleep no more, which is again him quoting the voice, means it imitated the again the pattern of the witches, which we've had that Lady Macbeth do as well before, and the three predictions they've made, replacing being king with Macbeth, as though Macbeth, you are king now, but you will sleep no more. Now, it's definitely also worth considering the link between sleep. Obviously, it's going to come in the rest of the play. We're going to see it later with Lady Macbeth. We're going to see lots of references to it, both Macbeth not being able to sleep and when he does sleep, having horrific dreams before. We had at the beginning of this act, Banquo talking about how he's trying to avoid sleep because of what happens to him when he's left alone and falls asleep, what influence the witches have. But of all of those, worth thinking about, worth adding to it, is that scene that's rarely paid much attention to, certainly rarely performed, at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 3, in which the witches on their own discuss this sailor's wife who refused to give chestnuts to the first witch, and how they're going to take their revenge on her by tormenting her husband. Now, again, it shows this idea that what evil forces, what supernatural forces do, is torment rather than actually do anything themselves. They get people involved and torment them. But it also, at that point, shows that one of the things they're going to do is they're going to take away his sleep. And therefore, that's placed as one of the key aspects. Before this, we had this list of what sleep is and how important it is. So, as well as just that line, as well as that idea there, think about the impact of sleep, think about the impact of the supernatural here. Now, of course, Lady Macbeth is incredibly practical in her response. When he talked about amen, not being able to say amen, she just said, consider it not so deeply. Yeah, not important. Here, she replies, so who said that then? Again, a very practical thing. You heard this voice? Who was it? Go on, who was shouting that in the corridor then? Now, having taken that practical response to try and calm and control him, which again we see at other points in the play, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, we then launch into this, where again we see that the approach she's having to take is, or maybe wants to take, is one of almost respect. She's referring to him as worthy Thane, but then at the same time is ordering him about. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. Well, worthy Thane, you unbend your noble strength. So, I don't know, is she trying to be that way and kind of on the edge, or is it just, again, the way their relationship works? She shows appropriate respect, but in the end she's in control. Washing the filthy witness from your hands, interesting image as well. Now, that then finishes with, why did you bring these daggers from the place? The moment at which she sees that he has done something ridiculous, that he's got to take them back. So if we compare that idea of worthy and noble, the worthy thing, with the idea of getting water, wash the filthy witness from his hands, well, we're thinking about the idea that she is attempted to control him. And this next bit shows, like in Act 1, Scene 7, I would argue, that it doesn't always work, that she is not in control. She tells him to go and do it, and he just says no. Quite blankly, I will go no more. I'm afraid to think what I've done, so therefore I dare not look on it. I'll go no more. I'm afraid to think of what I've done. Now, fear comes up a lot during it, but this is a really interesting version of fear. The fear of actually contemplating what he's done. Now, the thinking becomes an issue as well over the play. As it goes further on, he decides he's not going to think anymore, he's just going to act. And as he does that, his fears seem to disappear a little bit more, go into the background, until he comments on it in Act 5. And it's at this point Lady Macbeth loses patience with him. Infirm of purpose, you weakling, basically. That kind of an idea. To decide to do it herself. And then this very important statement, a statement kind of her philosophy. The sleeping, the dead are just like pictures. First of all. And that's what she's thinking. The sleeping, the dead are just like pictures. They don't really exist anymore. When people are asleep, when people are dead, they're not there in the room anymore. A very different response to Macbeth. Yeah? And then to repeat that's the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil is essentially to call him a child. And, watching his reactions, it's not unfair. But the contrast between the two of them is drawn, and also the way she's trying to deal with it and the way eventually he tests her patience. So think to herself, the influence, the impact of supernatural forces. How much impact are they having here at this point? Is Lady Macbeth just not believing it, or is she the practical one dealing with someone whose mind is going? And think about that relationship between them. Think about the role of Lady Macbeth at this point. Think about her changing role again, her changing moods and her changing feelings as she goes through. Okay, so let's go to this final key moment. Now, it begins with Macbeth on his own. It follows after this one, after the last one we just saw. It leaves Macbeth on his own as Lady Macbeth has gone to take the daggers back. Now, it's important that he's on his own, purely because of the importance of this image. It's a beautiful image, and it demonstrates exactly where he is at this point. First of all, the idea that the blood on his hand is so powerful that the oceans of the world could do nothing to wash it, and in fact he would actually turn the entire oceans red with his guilt. It's a wonderful image that shows the state he is in at this point. It also goes a little bit deeper. It's again following on hands, so again we're dealing with actions as well. The idea that the blood is on his hands, it's not on his brain or in his head, that not sitting there. It's him looking at what he's done. But probably much more interestingly, the relationship to nature, that he's acted against nature. That's why the oceans couldn't wash the blood off. Obviously, generally the idea of washing the blood off would be removing his guilt, clearing him from his guilt. And nature could not do that. It's so unnatural what he's done. There's the reference to Great Neptune's ocean, as though, again, even the great gods couldn't get in the way of him. I mean, the way he talks about gods and compares, not quite comparing himself here to gods, but the way he evokes them in what he's trying to say says something about what he's trying to achieve. And of course, if you really push it, and this is the kind of thing you've got to be a little wary of how you do it, there's always, in a society will be very conscious and well versed in the Bible, there's always going to be the idea of the Pontius Pilate story, the man who sent Jesus to his death, who symbolically washed his hands clean of Jesus' blood to say, it's not my responsibility, to the crowd, you chose. Which then would suggest that not only that idea of he cannot do what Pilate did, take away the responsibility, but also to suggest a sense of sinning beyond God, really, up to offending God. So really deep image here, going to be very important because of the comparison with Act 5 Scene 1, where Lady Macbeth uses an almost identical structure for when she's sleepwalking, to talk about not being able to get rid of the smell of the blood, and all the perfumes of Arabia could not get rid of the smell from my hands. Because of course she's not there to hear this. So how is she echoing what he's saying at this point? It does therefore potentially suggest an element of supernatural interference in making him say this. But then we've also got two moments when Lady Macbeth re-enters, that show the exact opposite to Macbeth's guilt by using that blood imagery. First of all, it's this sense of the red. Okay, I have hands of your colour. I have got the same level of guilt on this, but my heart isn't as white. I'm stronger inside. So she's literally, as a female, comparing herself to her husband and saying, I am the stronger one, and I will be ashamed to be as weak as you are. So we've got that again, that image, that idea of the relationship where she's being quite harsh with him straight away. But probably more useful is then the line a few lines later, when she says she hears the knocking and suggests a little water clears us of this deed. Now that, in direct contrast with all great Neptune's ocean not being able to wash the blood, a little water clears us, is as good an example as any of the comparison in their situations at this point. Okay, how it's not just that she's being practical, but how easily she views it, that by physically getting rid of the evidence, then they are clear. Whereas to Macbeth, that's irrelevant, because the inside of him knows the guilt and the horror of what he's done. So, consider that picture of Macbeth that we're getting through what he's saying, through that image, through what's trying to go there, and then consider that picture of Lady Macbeth, and consider the contrast between the two as it appears. Now, if we look at those big ideas we introduced here, we want to ask ourselves, it doesn't even need to be more specific than this, literally, Macbeth at this point in a play. What are we meant to think of him at this point? What impression are we getting of him at this point? What impression are we getting of Lady Macbeth? And then think about how that relationship is developed in this scene. And in order to get the sense of development, you want a direct contrast with Act 1 Scene 7 in particular, to see how her role is different to when she's trying to persuade him to actually do it. Then we've got the supernatural, and it is that base question we've said. What level of influence have the supernatural forces got at this point in time? Have they done their job and got what they wanted? Or are they still involved and interfering at this point? Is Act 5 Scene 1, which is a direct parallel with this scene. It follows almost the same structure. It has almost the same idea, but Lady Macbeth performing both roles of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Is that there to direct us that they are involving themselves as much here as they do later on? If we kind of then try and link it to the rest of the play, obviously we've got to ask ourselves the question of Macbeth compared to previously, Macbeth compared to after. Now, of course, we've got the scene immediately after this, which is important, kind of a follow-on from this in terms of Macbeth's character. But really, the main contrast then seems to be once he becomes king. How does his behaviour here fit with all that we see in Act 3, through his soliloquy, through his use and manipulation of the murderers, through his obsession with Banquo, through to his reaction to Macbeth and dealing with Banquo's ghost? How does this sow the seeds for that, relate to that, and what does that reveal? And of course, previously we've seen all those worries and guilt. Is this just an extension of the man following the dagger? We got the same with Lady Macbeth, and particularly I think it's about the sense that this might be the last time that she's able to perform this role. the role of controlling and organising him. In Act 3, Scene 2, the next time we see the two of them alone together, we see her trying to do the same thing in terms of reassuring him, calming him, refocusing him, but arguably with a lot less success. Although you could argue that her success in this scene is pretty weak. Then think about that relationship with them. So you say compare with Act 1 Scene 5, Act 1 Scene 7, the two scenes we've seen up to this point with the two of them together. Is it consistent, this relationship? Are we finding out more? Is there some sense of change? And then get back to the supernatural. Are they interfering in these events? If so, how do they continue after this? Do they need to do more? Do they need to do less? Is Macbeth set up in there as taking over from them? It's a massively important scene, and there's so much in it. If it's not ever one that comes up, and it has before, then it's definitely one that you're going to likely need to refer to, especially talking about either of them or their relationship.